So, welcome to this session of Hospitality Net Insiders. My name is Ian Millar from EHL, and I'm very happy to be joined by Mr. Pedro Torres, CEO of Youverse. So, to get us straight in, who's Pedro? What is Youverse? Who are you, and what do you do, Pedro?
Hi, Ian. Always a pleasure to speak with you. Let me, tell you a bit about that in latest things we've been doing. So I'm, as you said, I'm founder and CEO at Youverse, and essentially, as a company, we provide, as you know, identity infrastructure for the internet, and in particular for the hospitality sector. And we are essentially trying to drive this adoption of privacy-preserving authentication and making identity more secure and especially more convenient for people while protecting that privacy of their data. And in particular, myself, I'm involved in all the areas of the company. My focus is essentially on the go-to-market and growth, scaling the company as we create this products that will enable millions of people to be, have an easier and safer sharing of their identity and data about them.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you for that, Pedro. So you just said, obviously, hospitality is where you, let's say, a part of what you guys do, and obviously, this whole area of digital identity is something, or at least for some people, it's a very new subject. So, in your words, how would you define digital identity within the context of the hospitality industry?
Yes, very broad question, and identity. Let's start a bit before the question, digital identity in hospitality, and just think a bit about identity before the digital part. So, identity is a very difficult concept, very broad concept, but essentially it's kind of a collection of things that makes us characteristics, the contents of your brain, let's call it like that, and all the data that's associated with you individually somehow makes up your identity. Those are really personal things, all the details about someone. So, of course, we don't need that to interact with certain processes. Different processes will require different parts of information. If I'm walking down the street, maybe no information is required from me. But if I'm driving a car, then the way society is organized, maybe some more information may be required from me. So if you're checking into a hotel, now going to hospitality, there's different kinds of information, or catching a flight to stay in the travel area. So in practice, identity is some ability to prove something specific about you, which is maybe different from someone else. And so going a bit more into the question, the basic functionality of distinguishing between two human beings and telling them apart can be relevant. If you have two perfect coins, they are indistinguishable, but the human beings, they are unique. So sometimes it's you can use to distinguish people by biometrics, for example, but in some cases you don't need that level of granularity, level of detail. You just need a specific proof of some data about them. Maybe you're just buying alcohol, for example, and you just need to prove you're over 18. It's not about, it's a detail or a proof about a feature, some data point about you, and not necessarily that you individually are someone. So digital identity is a way of doing this in a digital way. So it's not physical documents. It's not. It's something you can do online or with your mobile phone in a digital way. And in hospitality, in particular, it has to do with all the data that's required for different processes in hospitality.
But getting back to your example you used before, you're saying that it's a typical hotel environment. You said identity can have sort of, if I rephrase it, different layers, right? It could be I'm Ian Millar, this is my age, this is, and then you have a lot more information. It could just be I'm over 18. In the context of hospitality, do you think it's a mix of all these different layers of identity, as you put it, or is it really the full-on, I need to know everything about you in terms of I want to check into a hotel or whatever I'm doing? Is there any sort of, is there one fixed way of doing it, or is there multiple flavors, I would say, of identity?
Yeah, I think we need to separate. That question has, as you said, different layers. I think the first layer is kind of legal obligations and regulations. So different countries will have different rules, but when you're using a hotel or some hospitality venue, there will be specific regulations on what needs to be there and what checks need to be done as you stay in the property. And there are some which are like legal or state enforced. For example, there may need to be an identification of someone in the sense of government identity. So knowing the document, the passport number of someone so that you have it in records. This is compulsory in many countries, and particularly in Europe, where you need to know who stay there for security reasons in the future. If something happens, you know the identities of people staying there. On the other hand, they may be non-obligatory things, which are like payment, for example. Hotels, a payment like a credit card number is still, as I described identity generally before, it's a part of your identity, a way for you to pay something. So getting those details is relevant. But sometimes it's also about, even having a key to a hotel it's part of your identity. So as I check in, I now get a new token that I can use, which opens this particular door. It should open that door for me, not for Ian if I'm registered on that room. So making sure that it's the right person using the right tokens as well is part of managing the identity in the process. And then I think there's a whole layer, which is where things become more interesting in digital identity, especially with privacy preserving technologies, which is, if personalization, I just describe identity as something which is, the details and personal things about you. Now, if you want to do personalization, that's exactly the kinds of things you want to tap into. I mean, if I like golf or if I like spas, then those two things are two facts about me which are relevant when you try to personalize or upsell something. But at the same time, there are personal things which I don't want potentially to be sharing that directly. So in a way, you would like to have the digital identity, which is kind of the obligatory compulsory things you need to provide in a privacy preserving manner. But also, I'd like to have as a guest, I'd like to have the ability to have something personalized without necessarily disclosing this information in your CRM that someone can check and say, okay, Pedro likes golf. Okay, let me share this. Maybe there's a system which is privacy preserving, which will know those preferences and will suggest the right things, but not necessarily have a database of those for everyone, which is kind of where the privacy things make sense.
Okay, and just on that one again, so people understand, is it clear that the idea of this, and I think your point's a very good one about personalization. Obviously, it's the big topic everyone talks around, right? Or we want to be personalize the customer stay. Is it the notion that the guest shares the information that they want to share with the host, the hotel, for example, or does it work in a different way around? Is it more about I, as a consumer, I have control of my identity and I decide what to share when and with who, or does it work differently?
Right. So I think there are 2 or 3 aspects which are very, very important in identity, and that's at least the standpoint we take as we approach this, and it's kind of the trend where identity is going, which is some people will call it decentralized identity. Some will just say that it's identity the person can control. But in a sense, it's, just as before with money, you had bills and coins. Suddenly you have banks, which now centralize the exchange of value of money. And they have these huge databases of what's happening everywhere in the world. And then you have no control over this. So they will know all the transactions. Your bank will know all the transactions you're doing. There's no way around it. And then you have this decentralized peer-to-peer way of exchanging value, like bitcoins and stuff like that. With identity, similar path is happening. So there was the physical cards; they can be shown and exchanged. Then there are these digital identities that come either through private companies or the state's digital identities that now serve these APIs and will know exactly all the transactions that are happening between me and my bank at which timestamp. And then you have these versions which are decentralized. And this is also where, for example, Europe is now enforcing these laws where the way you exchange data is different. I have some credentials on my phone, which are, you can verify them and know this is Ian Millar. His name is Ian Millar as signed by whichever country your passport is from. That is there. So the UK passport probably in your case, the Portuguese passport in my case. So the government will have signed some credential, which is on my phone. So if I go to a hotel and I show this credential, there's nothing going centrally, but there's a way of me to prove something about me. So if I just want to prove my date of birth, I don't have to disclose, prove my age. I don't need to disclose my whole identity. I just need to make a proof that's created from that, and it's out there for the hotel to check. If it's about the nationality, or if it's about the number of the passport, all of these things can be shared in a selective way, so that I can select what I'm sharing. So it's a major change in the way people share this information. But this trend of decentralizing identity has been there for maybe two or 3 years. What has now changed is that through that process and through that evolution of technology, there's also a law now. So of course, I'm maybe now focusing a bit on Europe, but there's 500 million people who now have a new law that just passed, which enforces countries to have the digital wallets, which abide to this way of sharing information that I just described, and which will have to be adopted and accepted by hotels, by banks in the near future. This is something like in 2 years. So for a hotel which has a PMS, which has some properties, some features, this means that hotel will need to make sure those features of accepting these new identities are there, just as now they have other ways of, passport reader or whatever they have at the moment. They will need to make those changes, and this is for the ability to share credentials in a better way, and also to have accurate data. So when you talk about personalization and for example, loyalty programs, one of the big things we've observed with clients we have is that the loyalty onboarding, many of the times you don't know if this is a recurring person coming to your hotel, or it's difficult for you to create this loyalty program and onboard them easily, because the burden of doing the onboarding is big, and because you don't have accurate data from the hotel, from the guests in the first place. So they've come to your hotel 20 times, but the next time they come, how do you know if your data is actually accurate, and you've done this with a digital accurate identity? You will know for sure this is the same person that came before, and now you can provide a very easy way for them to fill in their data without having to go through a process which is complicated. And people arriving at a hotel, the last thing they want to do is to go through an onboarding for a loyalty program. So it could be very easy to make.
Okay, then I'm going to pick up, if I may, on what you just said before, Pedro. You said that in a couple of years' time, this is going to sort of be the norm, as it were. And maybe just for the purpose of today's conversation, we can stick on Europe. Looking at how hotels collect identity now versus how they'll need to be doing this in maybe 2 years' time because of legal compliance, etc. What 3 tips would you give to a hotel right now in terms of for them to get ready for digital identity?
Yes. So I think, at the moment, most property management systems or guest-facing apps, they already have the functionalities required in general for guest processes. That's the go-to tool that hotels use to serve those processes. And identity is just a tiny part of the whole thing that those PMSs and those tools have to do. So for a hotel, digital identity, as I see it, the digital identity for a hotel should be something that comes from the usual tools they use, not something that should have to think about separately. And so in particular with this, for example, in Europe, this eIDAS 2.0, which is the name of this regulation for identity, this will completely change the way people prove who they are. But for a hotel, it should be kind of transparent. They should just make sure that their PMS brings this new functionality to them. So it's in a way, for them, they will get more accurate data, and they will get potentially new processes that can be improved through this gathering of data. But from a perspective of the hotel, I think the most actionable thing that they can do on the basis of this or digital identity in general is to talk to their PMS, and whatever they have at the moment, or their guest-facing apps, and ensure that those kinds of processes will be there, let's say in 6 months or in 12 months. Because having that ability, starting that conversation may have 2 outcomes. Maybe the PMS will get back to them and say, yep, this is something we are aware of. We have this new model coming in at that point, and this is fine for the hotel. That everything is happening. This is the least probable one, because this is new things coming in. So most PMSs, the most probable answer would be, okay, this is new to us, or this is something we are aware of, but we are still working on that. And I think the major actionable item for a hotelier to work on this is to ensure that they have a conversation with their PMS, their tools, their existing tools, to make sure that there's a way to process the identity data in the right way. Let me just so at the moment they are processing the processes that are already there for identity. It's just that they are evolving. So the basic process is I go with a physical card, I show it at the reception. Maybe they have a reader. Maybe they have a reader. Maybe they have something else, like someone looking at the document and filling in data. Maybe they scan it. Whatever it is, there's already a process. The problem with that process is, privacy regulations. So all kinds of worries that come to the CISO of that hotel on how that data is stored and how it is managed. That could go away with evolved versions of that. And the other thing is the experience. People will go there and they will queue and they will wait, and people are also not very comfortable with that part of maybe scanning documents and all that. So the other two processes that are there is let's see, the first evolution of that is you can easily process a document and maybe the person, when you're doing an online check-in, or even as you get there, with automated tools that only share the end results of the identity, and which kind of share let's say the name and fill in all the forms. So the convenience is solved, and the privacy, depending on how the technology provider is doing it, may also be partially solved. The second step, or the second evolution, is when you actually use credentials, as I described before, from this decentralized identity, where you actually own your data, you own your credentials. There's no central entity checking what's happening with your sharing of data, and you can revoke and use that data in the way you're in full control. So this is the new regulation that's coming in, and that's what's not there yet.
Okay, so what we're saying is the steps hotels can sort of start discussing internally, discuss with their PMS company, but then also they need to watch out for the whole regulatory statute stuff that will come out from the European Union, local governments, etc. So it's very much a stage process, right? Is what you're saying?
Yes. So the timeline is very well defined. So the law passed. It will come into force in May 20th. So it's in 1 week. And the law is only setting some timelines for the future. First bigger timeline is not for hotels or banks or stakeholders. It's really for the governments to make these wallets available in Europe. For each citizen, every member state will have to have a wallet made available to their citizens, and you can use it as a way to prove your identity. The second step, which is around in 2 years, which means in terms of how integrations with PMSs and evolutions of software go, it's tomorrow. So in about 2 years, everyone has to be accepting these identities. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done in the next 6 months, 12 months to make sure that those identities are accepted. And because it's not just about bringing the standard and accepting them, it's also the new processes that come out of that. Because of course you accept them, but now you have a whole new opportunity, because all this data is very accurate. You can personalize based on that data as well in a different way than you were doing before. So if I'm able to do different kinds of proofs, like share some interests that can be tapped into for personalization as part of that, without having to disclose my personal information, this is a new area where then you can build applications on top of that. You can know if someone goes to the breakfast, if they have breakfast included or not, in a privacy way, without having to queue, without having to wait for confirmation with a room number and all those usual processes. So there's a lot of operational things that can be changed and improved based on that. But the major change or major driver right now is that this has to be accepted from the point of view of the regulation or the law of the digital wallets.
Okay, then I'm just being conscious of time. 2 more questions for you, Pedro. This one can be quite a short one, and it's a bit of a long one to finish. Is this something that could also be applicable for staff? So staff arriving at the hotel, clocking in, clocking out, or is this really only a guest-facing thing?
Yeah, it can be used for anything really. So it's identity is just you make proofs about something. So basically, if you're a staff and you want to clock in, clock out, if you want to prove you're a member of a certain, you work for a certain company, all of these can be credentials and can be used. As I see it, the big value for hotels, it's not in that particular space, it's on the guest-facing stuff. But of course, everything that has to do with, the term credential is actually, it was used 50 years ago for a passport. A passport is a credential, a staff card is a credential, driver's license, even my university diploma, all of these things are credentials in that sense. So you can digitize them and make them available as, actually, these wallets that are coming in, they're not just about replacing or improving the government identity. They are placeholders of credentials, and you can put anything in there. So you can have these wallets as a basic identity will be something from the government. So it's your basic identity from whichever all the others are derived. But you can then have specific proofs about you. So you have a degree from this place. You have 200 days of streak in Duolingo. Whatever it is that you have from an API, for example, in LinkedIn or whatever it is, this can be made into a credential. So in the future, all these credentials can be part and it can be used in a privacy-preserving manner. So I think sometimes people think about these credentials as just a digitization of a physical card, but in practice, there are ways of exchanging data, which is privacy-preserving. So it's really about changing the way that people share data for the future.
Okay. The final question, you mentioned the timeline of 2 years. So let's jump ahead now. So I'm asking Pedro Torres the question in the year 2026. Now that we've been through the 2 years and everything's in place and life is wonderful, and all these processes are in place, how can you see this changing the customer experience? Are we really now talking that you used the word biometrics a few times? There's no more reception. I'm going to go straight to my room number. My face is my door key. Do you think we're going to reach that point in 5 to 10 years time, or is that still a bit too far off?
No, absolutely. So there are things which take time in terms of adoption. I think a major issue in adoption that we had was interoperability. Although there were standards, they were interoperable. The thing is, if standards have no impact if people are not adopting them. So there's a perfect standard for everyone to use, but no one's using it. They're all talking different languages. It's difficult. So this interoperability was a bit of a problem. So there was no cooperation between different stakeholders. Now, with this kind of initiatives and kind of large chunks of population, like 500 million, and in other places, other geographies, similar things are happening, converging to a particular standard. This is very good for adoption. And this was a major obstacle before. I think with this, in particular, the EU legislation, this is changing, and this is now a big push forward. Going back to your question on the room thing, for example, I think if you think about hotels accepting this kind of identities, they will have a definite proof that it's me. So they have my name, they have my identity card number if needed for their check-in. So they can have no doubt of a proof that this is the guest, much better than done at the front desk by a person. So it's perfectly easy to deploy the key to the room on a mobile on that basis. As long as you know that that person is the one coming into your hotel. And you can also check that as people arrive, they may have to do, even on their own phone, they can have to make sure that they are the right people at that moment to use the key in the next 10 minutes or in the next day, whatever it is that the operational business rules make it up for. So basically, you'll have a way, as a hotelier, you will have the checks and balances you need, check identity, all the checks you need. You just need to deploy that key. Then you can open the room with your mobile. And opening with a mobile, it's all the NFC readers that are on most doors in hotels will be able to read it from mobile NFC. So I think these kinds of things are for sure in the next 5 years will be the norm. Maybe some other things will take more time in terms of the operation, but the basic check-in property, right now there are changes happening on the online check-in that we're doing at many hotels on maybe the first transformation I mentioned on the digital identity. So without the wallets and without the decentralized identity, there's already major change coming to hotels on how they verify people's identity. This second layer will make it completely mobile. So you can do all the proofs and everything on a mobile and get the key on the mobile much easier as a credential that you have. And then it will be much more seamless for people, much less headaches for the hotels as well on the way they accept these identities. So for sure, in 5 years, because of the regulations I mentioned, they will have to have done that. But also from an operational perspective, interoperability is there. Applications are already there. The PMSs can deploy keys to. So this will be a reality for sure in less than 5 years.
Okay. As conscious of time, we don't want to overgo the format. So, Pedro, I'd like to thank you for taking the time. It'd be great to speak to you this afternoon. Thanks for the conversation and the insight. And I think we'll call that a wrap. Pedro, have a great day. Thanks for being with us.
Yeah, thank you very much, James.
Okay, bye-bye.